The commander lay on the ground covered in blood. The radio wasn't working, no support was coming, and Private Marcus Thompson found himself alone at the summit of the 200-yard hill. In front of him were 500 Viet Cong. Behind him, nothing. He could either abandon his wounded commander and run or defend this cursed hill they'd been fighting for 10 days until his last breath. Welcome to Vietnam Stories. Before we begin this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today, and if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. May 20th, 1969, Hamburger Hill, Vietnam. This hill, also known as Hill 937, had been hell itself for 10 days. The boys of the 101st Airborne Division were in the midst of a battle with bullets flying thicker than rain. Marcus Thompson, 19 years old, was a black kid from Detroit. He was 18 when he came to Vietnam. Now he looked much more mature than his age. Coming from Detroit to Vietnam wasn't by chance. He had lost his father at 12, a factory accident. His mother Sarah had raised him working 2 jobs. After high school, Marcus chose to join the army instead of college. "I want to do something for my country," he had told his mother. Sarah saw the determination in her son's eyes. "Be careful, son," she had said. "I can't bear to lose you." When Marcus arrived in Vietnam, he was different from the other soldiers. He didn't complain, didn't pick fights. He quietly did his duty. His friends called him Detroit. He liked that. It reminded him of home. When he arrived at Hill 937, Marcus had seen 9 days of intense combat. His friends were falling one by one. Private Johnson had been wounded on the 2nd day. Sergeant Miller had been lost on the 5th day. Corporal Washington had fallen to a sniper's bullet on the 7th day. It all started at 6:30 a.m. Lieutenant Reynolds had shouted at Marcus. "Thompson, watch the left flank. Any word from Charlie Company?" Marcus had checked the radio. "No, sir. Radio's silent." "Damn it," Reynolds had said. "You and Johnson get behind those rocks. There's enemy movement." But Johnson was gone. He had fallen to a sniper's bullet an hour earlier. Marcus didn't tell Reynolds this because he didn't want to break the commander's morale. Marcus had gone behind the rocks alone. He checked his M16. 3 magazines of ammo left. He counted his grenades. He had 2. He opened his medical bag. Bandages and morphine weren't enough. There was a special reason he carried this medical bag. In Detroit, at the hospital where his mother worked, Marcus would watch the nurses. He had volunteered in the emergency room. Seeing blood didn't scare him. He knew how to dress wounds. In Vietnam, this knowledge had saved many of his friends. Marcus surveyed his position. Rocks on the left, a ditch on the right, pine trees behind. It was a good defensive position, but impossible to hold alone. The enemy numbers were too great. The enemy attack began at 8:45 a.m. First silence, then footsteps coming from afar. Then hell. AK-47 sounds were echoing through the hill. Marcus stayed behind the rocks, carefully selecting his targets. He had hit the first enemy from 165 yards, the second from 220 yards. Marcus's shooting ability came from his days in Detroit. Before his father died, he would take him hunting. "Son," his father would say, "be patient, hold your breath, count your heartbeats, pull the trigger on the 3rd beat." These lessons were now saving his life in Vietnam. The enemies were coming more organized. Marcus was observing their tactics. First mortars, then automatic weapons, finally infantry assault. Classic Viet Cong tactics. But Marcus knew this. He had learned it in training camp. "Thompson!" Reynolds' voice came through the explosions. "Support the right flank." Marcus ran to the right flank when he saw his friends falling. Private Williams was hit in the chest, not moving. Sergeant Davis had a severed hand, writhing in pain. Marcus knelt beside Davis. "Hang on, Sarge." Davis spoke while spitting blood. Kid, get out of here. There are too many." Marcus gave Davis morphine. "Nobody's leaving, Sarge. We're all staying here." But Davis's eyes had closed. forever. Marcus took Davis's dog tags. In his letters to his mother in Detroit, he had mentioned Davis. "A black sergeant like me," he had said. "He protects me." Now Davis was gone, and Marcus would have to tell his family. Davis's last words wouldn't leave Marcus's mind. Too many. There really were too many. But Marcus wouldn't run. His father had told him as a child, "Son, when hard times come, you'll be the man who stands, not the one who runs." The second wave came at 10:30 a.m. This time more organized, more deadly. Rockets were tearing apart the positions on the hill. Marcus jumped into a foxhole. Next to him was only a wounded soldier. Private Rodriguez, shot in the leg, unconscious. Marcus put Rodriguez on his back. "Commander, we're falling back." Reynolds shouted from 55 yards away, "Negative, Thompson, hold the position." "But Commander, there are too many," the young soldier shouted. "You have your orders, soldier," the commander replied. Marcus carried Rodriguez to a safe place. Then he returned, because that's what a soldier does. Rodriguez was a young kid of Spanish descent. He was from Texas. He and Marcus had become good friends. During night watches, Rodriguez would talk about his family. "I have a sister," he would say. "I tell her about Uncle Marcus." Now Rodriguez was unconscious and Marcus was worried about him. As Marcus carried Rodriguez to safety, he thought about Lieutenant Reynolds's character. Reynolds was a good commander. He thought about his soldiers. He never put any of them in unnecessary danger. But now the situation was different. This hill was strategically very important. It couldn't be lost. Reynolds was a military academy graduate. He had received traditional military training. But in Vietnam, what he learned at the academy wasn't enough. Here he was learning by living, and he was learning a lot from soldiers like Marcus. The third wave came at 12 p.m. This time it started with mortar fire. Pieces of earth and stone were flying in the air. Marcus made a crater his shelter. He was using his bullets carefully. Every shot counted. The enemy numbers were increasing. 50, 100, 200. Marcus stopped counting. In this situation, Marcus remembered the streets of Detroit. There, too, survival against numerical superiority was necessary. But there were no weapons there. Only fists, stones, intelligence. Now there were real weapons and real death. His neighborhood in Detroit was a tough place. Gangs, drugs, violence. But Marcus had stayed on the right path with his mother's advice. "Son," Sarah Thompson would say, "I'll get you out of this life. You'll be different." And Marcus had become different. He had joined the army, come to Vietnam, and now he was fighting for his country. But now, on Hill 937, the street rules of Detroit applied. Survive, protect your friends, never give up. The fourth wave came at 2:15 p.m. This time nobody was left. Only Marcus, Lieutenant Reynolds, and Private Chen. The three were trapped in a 220-yard area at the summit of the hill. Chen was firing with the machine gun. "Running out of ammo, Thompson!" Marcus threw his last grenade. "Hold on a little longer." Reynolds was shouting into the radio. "Bravo base, we need support. Coordinates 634-827. The response from the radio. "Negative Bravo 6, air support not available, fall back." Reynolds shouted into the radio. "Falling back is not possible. This is Hill 937, we've been fighting for 10 days. "You have your orders, Lieutenant. Fall back immediately," the radio operator repeated. Reynolds threw the radio. "Damn it!" Marcus understood Reynolds' reaction. The commander wasn't getting support from his superiors. No air support, no reserves, only them, at the summit of the hill, against the enemy. In this situation, Marcus respected Reynolds. Most commanders would panic in this situation, but Reynolds remained calm. He was thinking about his soldiers. He was doing his duty. Reynolds was from Wisconsin. He was the son of a farming family. Before entering the military academy, he had worked on his father's farm. He knew hard work. He knew responsibility. And now, this knowledge was helping him in Vietnam. Marcus understood Reynolds' situation. a young commander in his first battle facing such a difficult situation. But Reynolds stood strong, and Marcus continued to fight for him. The fifth wave came at 3:45 p.m. Chen had fallen. 3 bullets to the chest. Marcus ran to Chen's side. Chen spoke in his last breath. "Thompson, tell my family. Tell them I'm proud." Marcus closed Chen's eyes. "I'll tell them, brother." Chen's last words had deeply affected Marcus. This young soldier was thinking about his family before death. He wanted them to be proud. As Marcus looked at Chen's body, he saw a letter in his pocket. A letter to his family that he hadn't sent yet. "Dear Mom and Dad," the letter read. "I've made good friends here. I have a friend named Marcus from Detroit. He's a very brave soldier. I'm learning a lot from him. When the war is over, I'll invite him home." Marcus's eyes filled with tears as he read the letter. Chen had written such beautiful things about him. Now Chen was gone, but Marcus would deliver this letter to his family. He would tell them their son was a hero. Now only Marcus and Reynolds remained. The sixth wave came at 4:30 p.m. Reynolds knelt beside Marcus. "Kid, how much ammo do you have?" Marcus checked his magazine. "Half a magazine, sir." "Got any grenades?" the wounded commander asked. "No, sir," Marcus replied. Reynolds touched Marcus's shoulder. "Son, it's time to get out of here." "Where will we go, sir?" the young soldier asked. "You'll go. I'll stay," Reynolds replied. Marcus looked at Reynolds. "Sir, I can't leave you." "This is an order, Thompson. Get out of here," the commander insisted. "No, sir," Marcus replied. The seventh wave came at 5 p.m. This time they were much closer. 110 yards, 90 yards, 65 yards. Marcus knew every shot counted. Reynolds was using his last bullets. "Thompson, stop them!" Marcus was aiming one by one. First enemy, second enemy, third enemy. The bullets were gone. "Sir, I'm out of ammo," Marcus shouted. Reynolds threw his last magazine to Marcus. "Take this." "What will you use?" the worried soldier asked. Reynolds drew his pistol. "This." The eighth wave came at 5:30 p.m. The enemies were 45 yards away. Marcus was fighting with the last bullets Reynolds had given him. Every shot had to hit. Reynolds was stopping close-range enemies with his pistol, but a rocket had landed right next to their position. The explosion's sound wave had deafened Marcus. His ears were ringing. His eyes were tearing. When he recovered, he saw Reynolds. The commander lay on the ground, covered in blood. He was hit in the leg and stomach. His consciousness was returning. Marcus knelt beside Reynolds. "Sir, hang on!" Reynolds was breathing hard. "Thompson, get out of here." "No, sir, I can't leave you," Marcus insisted. This is an order." The wounded commander groaned. Marcus bandaged Reynolds. "The time for taking your orders has passed, sir." These words showed Marcus's character. He was a disciplined soldier, but also humane. He wouldn't leave his commander behind. The values he learned in Detroit were valid in Vietnam, too. Don't abandon your friends, keep your word, fight to the end. Marcus checked Reynolds' wounds. The leg wound was deep but not life-threatening. The stomach wound was more serious. There could be internal bleeding. But Marcus, with his hospital experience from Detroit, knew wound care. He would apply pressure, stop the bleeding. "Sir," Marcus said, "can I tell you something? You're the best commander I've ever known. You worry about your soldiers. You try to protect us. It's an honor to fight for you." Reynolds couldn't respond to Marcus's words. He was too weak, but the expression in his eyes was thanking him. The ninth wave came at 6 p.m. Marcus had put the wounded commander on his back. He carried him to the small bunker at the summit. Reynolds was semi-conscious. The enemies were 35 yards away. Marcus was counting his last bullets. 8 rounds left. Marcus spoke to himself. 8 bullets, 100 enemies. The math doesn't look good. Reynolds spoke, groaning. "Marcus, go. Please go." Marcus held Reynolds' hand. Sir, I'm from Detroit. I didn't learn to abandon and run there. These words reflected Marcus's soul, the values his mother taught him in Detroit. Be brave, be honest, never abandon your friends. These values were now being lived out in Vietnam. As Marcus held his wounded commander's hand, he remembered his home in Detroit. It was a small house in a poor neighborhood, but full of love. His mother Sarah would tell him stories every evening, stories of heroes. Son, Sarah would say, real heroes don't become famous, they just do what's right. Now Marcus remembered his mother's words. The right thing wasn't to abandon his commander and leave. The right thing was to fight to the end. Marcus counted the last bullets in his pocket. 7 rounds left. There were also a few bullets in the pistol. It wasn't enough, but Marcus would do his best. The 10th wave came at 6:30 p.m. Marcus started with 8 bullets. First enemy, second enemy, third enemy. The 7th bullet hit. The 8th bullet clicked. The magazine was empty. Marcus threw the M16 aside. He had Reynolds' pistol in his belt. 3 bullets left. The enemies were 20 yards away. Marcus leaned into Reynolds' ear. Sir, it was an honor to fight with you. Reynolds spoke with his last strength. For me too, Marcus. Marcus stood up. He drew the pistol. The enemies were 15 yards away. First bullet, hit. Second bullet, hit. Third bullet, hit. The pistol was empty too. Marcus picked up a rock he saw nearby. The enemies were 10 yards away. Come here, Marcus shouted. Come here! But then he heard a sound. Motor sounds coming from afar. Helicopter sounds. Bravo 6, this is Apache 1. Mark your position. Marcus shouted with his last strength. Here! When Marcus heard these sounds, he began to hope. Maybe they would be saved. Maybe Reynolds would survive. Maybe they would go home. The sound of the helicopter was getting closer. Marcus leaned over Reynolds. Sir, we're saved. The helicopter is coming. Reynolds tried to smile despite the difficulty. The most important thing for him was his soldiers' safety. And Marcus was safe. The soldiers descending from the helicopter quickly approached their positions. When Marcus saw them, he was relieved. Finally, support had arrived. Finally, this nightmare was ending. But Marcus would never be the same after this experience. What he saw and lived through on Hill 937 had changed him. Now he knew what war was. He knew what friendship meant, and he had learned the true meaning of sacrifice. Soldiers were rappelling down ropes 5 minutes later. Medics were putting Reynolds on a stretcher. Marcus couldn't get up. Medic approached Marcus. Soldier, are you wounded? Marcus shook his head. No, just very tired. How long have you been here? The medic asked. 10 days. We fought for 10 days. Marcus replied. How many are left? The worried medic asked. Marcus looked at the summit of the hill. There were many bodies of his friends. Then he looked at Reynolds' stretcher. 2 people, Marcus said. Only 2 people left. The medic touched Marcus's shoulder. Son, you're a hero. Marcus shook his head. No, I'm just a soldier. As he was being loaded into the helicopter, Marcus looked at Hamburger Hill one last time. 10 days, 200 soldiers, 1 hill. And in the end, only he and Reynolds had survived. This hill was now part of Marcus's life. Davis's blood was in this soil, Chen's last breath was in this air, Rodriguez's pain remained in these rocks, and Marcus would carry these memories for life. In the helicopter, Marcus sat quietly. The medics were taking care of Reynolds. His commander was stable. This relieved Marcus. Marcus looked at Chen's letter he took from his pocket. He would take this letter to Chen's family. He would tell them their son was a hero. He would also go to Davis's family, to Rodriguez's family too. There were too many families, too much pain, but Marcus would tell them the truth. Their sons, brothers, fathers had fought heroically. They had given their lives for their country, and none of them had died in vain. That night, when the paperwork was filled out, what Marcus did was recorded. Private Marcus Thompson defended Hill 937 for 10 days, protected his wounded commander, Lieutenant Reynolds, stood alone against 500 enemies, managed to survive. But Marcus never talked about it, because he was just a soldier, and soldiers do their duty, then remain silent. After returning from Vietnam, Marcus went back to Detroit. His mother, Sarah, met him at the airport. She cried when she saw her son, because Marcus had changed. There was a different weight in his eyes. "Son," Sarah said, "how was it there?" Marcus looked at his mother. "Mom," he said, "some things can't be told. They can only be carried." Sarah understood her son's words. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged him and took him home. In the house, in Marcus's room, there were a few items he brought from Vietnam. Chen's letter, Davis's dog tags, Rodriguez's photo. These weren't Marcus's memories. These were the trusts of his lost friends. From that day on, Marcus visited Davis's family. He told them their son was a brave soldier. He went to Chen's family. He told them their son's last words. He went to Rodriguez's family. He told them how their son was saved. These families saw Marcus as part of their lost children. He loved them like his own family too, because on Hill 937 they had become blood brothers. Years passed. Marcus lived a quiet life in Detroit. He worked, got married, had children. But he never forgot Vietnam. Every May 20th, he remembered the friends lost on Hill 937, quietly, without telling anyone. 50 years later, one day someone might tell you the story of an old, quiet man. Maybe that man, once upon a time on Hamburger Hill at 19 years old, stood alone against 500 enemies. Maybe that man risked his life for his wounded commander. But you would never know this, because real heroes don't tell their stories. Now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Marcus? Someone who appeared ordinary but had an extraordinary past? Write their name in the comments. Share their story. Because at Vietnam Stories, we're here to remind people of forgotten heroes. If this story touched you, subscribe and help us make sure these stories are heard. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, if you ever see an old, quiet man, take a second look, because he might be someone who once fought for you.